So welcome all of you to the 7th session of the Path of Purification. Now, before we start the session, let's just step back into a few moments silence. So warm greetings to you all. Now, before I start the session, I open the session. I'd just like to say a few words about the hosts, the Journal of Integral Health, because NAMAH isn't just engaged in running workshops, courses, and programs. It's a long-standing certification available in print and in journal. Now, NAMAH is the Journal of Integral Health, and it looks at the influence of the soul or spirit in man's search for health and well-being. It examines man's physical and mental health in an integral way, and it looks at it in terms of his growth and spiritual progresses. Everything is always interlinked. It looks at individual and social health from the perspective of the evolutionary process. It's a vast field, and the range of material we publish is really very diverse. But the one common feature behind it all is the influence of the soul on our health and its influence on the rest of our being. So NAMAH is published quarterly and available online for subscription in either format, www.namahjournal.com. So I definitely recommend you have a look and give it a try. So we're so delighted this evening to have Jayashree with us, Jayashree Blench. She joined the Gnostic Center in Delhi, Haryana in 1996 and was trained by Amita Mehra to facilitate workshops in the writings of Aurobindo and the Mother. The next year, she visited Pondicherry and Aurobindo, and so started her journey in integral yoga. Moving to the US in 2001, Jayashree trained in Hatha Yoga and Ayurveda. She had been a high school teacher in Delhi. She trained to be a Montessori teacher alongside her practice of yoga. She now immerses herself in the study of Savitri, and she conducted a wonderful workshop not so long ago on conscious sleep, which was really very, very well received by everyone that took part in it. So I'm very much looking forward to this session, and the session is about the purification of sight. So over to you, Jayashree. Enjoy the session, everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Very much
Thank you
so.
very much. Thank you, James. And thanks to all the participants who are here today. I welcome all of you to this session of the Path of Purification. The topic chosen is the purification of sight. Sight and hearing are the two main instruments of the spirit. And in the path of yoga, especially in the path of integral yoga, where we seek purification of the entire nature, purification of the senses becomes indispensable as a starting point. So all the senses, it is important to purify all the senses. However, for our discussion today, I thought we will talk on the purification of sight. So what is purification? Earlier colleagues last week have spoken and explained to us a lot about the purification process. We know that Sri Aurobindo has said, it is an essential means to self-perfection. Essential. Why essential? In the three principles of integral yoga, purification is the first principle. Then is concentration, and then is liberation. So purification is the starting point. Therefore, it is an essential means towards the self-perfection. When we talk about purification, however, we're not talking about outer rules, therefore. Purification in integral yoga is an internal process. It is a call of the soul. It is not an outer manifestation of rules and regulations like fasting, cleansing, observing certain rituals, doing certain prayers. These are external means and they have their place. But in the integral yoga, purification is a call of the soul. You feel an inner need. The soul is ready to start its journey. And the soul is always pure. That doesn't need purification. What needs purification are the instruments of the spirit. And the instruments of the spirit are the lower nature. All the parts and beings of the lower nature. The physical, the vital, and the mental. All these three parts comprise the lower nature as well. I don't want to go into details. I think all of us know that man has evolved out of the inconscient. So we are born through the ignorance. We are born through the darkness. We are born out of the darkness. Purification is moving towards the light. And this first step is decided by the soul. So it's a top-down process. It comes from the highest parts of our being and it guides us through the process. Self-perfection being the aim of integral yoga. Why? How can we bring this purification to really manifest itself in our life? Why do we need the purification? It is not a passive purity that we are seeking. We are not seeking to be free from impurities because we want self-realization, merge with the absolute. We are seeking purification so that we become an appropriate instrument of the divine in this world. Because Sri Aurobindo's yoga talks about living in the world and working in the world as an instrument of the divine. In order to be a correct instrument of the divine, a pure instrument of the divine, a clean and thorough instrument of the divine, we need the purification. And we are not to do the work only through our purification process. Sri Aurobindo says we have to do the divine work. So even the nature of the work is a divine work. And for that divine purpose, naturally, the purification is absolutely indispensable. So, having said that we have to bring ourselves in alignment with the purpose of the soul, the will of the soul. So we work through the Spirit's will in the world, in our daily life, in our interactions, in our thoughts, words, and deeds. The next step is concentration, where we focus and gather all this energy. Through purification, as the instruments are purified, the body, the mind, and the vital become capable of holding the higher power when it descends. That's the second purpose of purification. It's not just that we should become capable instruments in the world. Definitely that is important. Equally important is this body, the mind and the vital have to be strong enough to hold that higher power that descends into the purified instrument. That is another reason it is absolutely imperative to purify all the parts of the being, all the parts. And these parts are interdependent. So as you purify the vital, it's not as though you're just purifying the vital alone. It will reach out, the purification process reaches out and touches the mind and the physical as well, because they're all interdependent. So it's not a sole step. It touches all the other parts of the being. And the final principle being the liberation. Liberation from what? From these impurities, from the ignorance, from the way we see things, the way we interact with them, the way we react to them. It's a liberation from that. There is a great freedom that is achieved. So these are the three main things that we are looking at when we talk about purification. Why it is the first step and how it leads to the other steps and what exactly we purify and why. Now we come to the senses. Sri Aurobindo in the synthesis has said, sense is fundamentally not the action of certain physical organs, but the contact of consciousness with its objects. So it is, generally we think that, the senses are there to tell us about our world, so that we get a knowledge of the world around us. We know how to conduct ourselves. We can control certain things. We can behave in a certain way. It's an input that we get from our environment and we react to it. And the senses play their role. It's a physical way of looking at things, and that is the starting point. But it is not just that. It is actually the contact of consciousness. So behind the senses, there is the supreme consciousness. And it is this which seeks contact with the outside world. Senses, again, are just the instruments through which it acts. Now, in the Vedas, the senses are referred to as panis. Panis, P-A-N-I. Panis. What are panis? Panis are dealers or traffickers who preside over sense activities. These are certain forces within us. They preside over the sense activities, and their immediate root is in the subconscious. in the darkness. So they hide in the cave of the darkness and they steal the light that comes from the higher worlds. That is how the ancient rishis and sages saw the sense activities. They were stealers of light. Not only did they steal the light that descended from the higher worlds, they hid them in the cave of the subconscious, which means that hidden deep in the subconscious are potencies and capabilities that through purification can be manifested through the senses. This is a transformation of those dark forces. So we are talking of a very deep inner transformation that happens with this purification process. It is bringing out those forces, those treasures which have been hidden in the dark cave. So this is the whole struggle. This is the whole struggle of man. It is to replace the dark activities with the luminous ones through the working of the mind and the life force. That is the true purpose of the senses. Now, sight. So what is sight? It is also known as drishti. Drishti is an Indian word, and it means gaze or vision. Gaze, G-A-Z-E. Gaze or vision. And it is closely connected to meditation and concentration. And we'll examine that in a moment. We use our drishti generally for two purposes. There is an external gaze, an outer way of looking at the world around us. And there is an inner gaze, which all of us have experienced when we close our eyes. It begins with closing our eyes, but in an advanced stage, you can even gaze inwardly with your eyes open. That's when you meditate with your eyes open. You are inwardized, but your eyes are open. But it's an inner gaze. The gaze is turned in. In what? Where is the gaze turned inward to? It is turned into the inner being. It becomes part of the inner subtle senses. So there are external senses and then there are subtle inner senses. So there is an outer sight and there is an inner sight. This inner sight we all experience. Common experience is dreams. When we see dreams or visions, when we visit beautiful places in our imagination, we look at a picture and we are carried far away into some beautiful landscape or a feeling or an experience that is inwardized. That is the inner gaze. Going deeper with this inner gaze, there is the gaze of the Sakshi. Sakshi is the witness Purusha. And when we do the practice of the witness, when we do the stepping back practice, where we step back and we take the poise of the witness, we watch ourselves externally. We step back from life, mind, and vital. We align ourselves with this inner witness, and then we experience the gaze of the witness, which is clarity and total impartiality, because it is the witness gaze. You witness yourself as the other. You see yourself as the other. And there is nothing in between. There is no emotional contact, no emotional investment, no attachment to this other that you watch. It is as though you watch yourself from a distance. And it's a very good practice on the path of trying to step back to observe yourself, your thoughts, your nature. To observe is to see without judgment. That is observation. So when we step back into the witness, we are observing ourselves without judgment, with complete clarity and with a silent mind. So there are these different kinds of sight, different kinds of gazes. Of course, the witness gaze does not need purification because it is the soul, gaze of the soul. The inner gaze, which we often see in dreams and with which we see in dreams, with which we experience visions and inner experiences, is dependent on the outer experiences too. As we experience the outer world, we absorb these impressions into the inner self, and we replay them in our dreams. So it is this seeing that needs to be purified. The sense of sight there needs to be purified. And we'll go a little deeper into why that happens. So there are different forms of impurity. The first impurity arises out of what Aurobindo refers to as the separative ignorance. This is the ego. The ego that was born as a necessity of evolution. It was born, the ego is the separative ignorance, where we see ourselves as a separate I. It is a formation of nature. In the course of evolution, it's a formation of nature. But the soul intent, it is the intent of the soul towards individuality. Because the one expresses itself through the many. So the soul has an intent towards individualization, therefore. And it allows itself to be confused with the ego, with the idea of the ego. So it gets trapped in this idea of the ego. So that is the first impurity. The second impurity arises because the higher parts of our being depend on the lower parts. So life arose out of matter. It depends on matter. Mind arose, the vital came out of life. The mind arose out of life. It depends on life. So there is an interdependence. And the soul, in its intention towards individualization, begins to look upon itself as a bodily manifestation. It confuses and identifies itself with the body. And this causes the veil of separation. This wrong identification or this mistaken confusion causes the veil. Purification is an attempt to open that veil, lift the veil of separation. So we have the ego, we have the dependence. So these higher parts, must learn not to depend on the lower parts. That is the aim of the purification. The lower parts of the nature have to be transformed willingly. They have to will themselves. They have to agree to transform into the higher aspects, to become conduits of the higher powers. Purification does that. Then we come to the role of the gunas. The gunas are the sattva, rajas, and tamas. The purity, the activity, the dynamic part of the vital, and then the tamas, which is the inertia, the sloth, the laziness, the fixity, the rigidity of tamas. These three attributes of nature form part of, it is actually all of our nature. Everything is transformed and colored by these gunas in various aspects and combinations. Nothing is purely tamas. Tamas has some rajas in it and some sattva in it, but overly it is tamas. Therefore, we call it tamasic. So when you don't feel like doing anything, you're in a depression, you don't want to step out, you're brooding, you just had some bad news and you just give in to it. That is tamas. That becomes part. And then we see everything from that tamasic point of view. Even a happy incident becomes cause for brooding, looking at the dark side of it, looking at the negativities of it. Oh, this is only for a short time. After this, I will suffer, to, languish. So gunas affect our sight. And there has to be a cleansing of the gunas in us. We have to transcend, in fact, the gunas completely. And we transcend it not suddenly from tamas to sattva, but we transcend it gradually. Nature works gradually through our evolution in this transcendence. But when we are under the power of the soul, the purification is happening, then the soul begins to do its transformation process. We only have to cooperate, first have the knowledge that this is happening in this way, and then cooperate with that which is happening within us. So where does impurity lead us? Impurities lead to loss of ananda. The major purpose of life is ananda, delight, delight of being, enjoyment of possession. Life, the Lord wants to enjoy himself through his manifestation, through this ananda. Impurities make us lose sight of it. We do not believe in it. We do not think ourselves capable also of having ananda in our lives because of ego. Because we see ourselves as separate. So we want this ananda in our little separative self, according to what I like, what I want, what I desire. So it becomes the wanting, the craving of a separative ego. And this leads to suffering because we know desires never satisfy us. We fulfill one desire, we move to the next. And as soon as we get what we wanted, it loses its charm. Somehow it suddenly devalues. And then we move on to something which perhaps may have more value. We are constantly craving. Now, what is it in us that is craving? It is the soul craving for delight. It is the soul craving for that which it knows it already possesses, but has somehow got covered with all this darkness, excuse me, impurities. It is that craving. So it is the craving of an insatiable being, of a being that is so vast. And we are trying to satisfy that craving by fulfilling little desires here and there. How will it ever be satisfied? How will there ever be ananda? So that is how we lose ananda, due to the separative ignorance, due to desire. So at this point, I want to talk a little bit about how desire and craving become a way of life. So much so that we are constantly desiring automatically. We don't even know that we have fallen into the mode of desiring constantly. It becomes a habit. How does it become a habit? Within the being, there is what is known as the psychic prana. Sri Aurobindo talks a lot about the purification of the psychic prana, what is known as the nervous vital. It is the nervous life mind. And this is the sheath within us which receives the impulses from outside and carries it to the inner awareness. Now I'm telling you the process of how it happens. There is a nervous vital sheath within us called the psychic prana. It is animated with the breath, with the life breath. And when you see something which is outside, it sends impulses. The outer object sends out its impulses, and this nervous sheath, the psychic prana within, picks up those impulses and carries them to the inner awareness. Then the inner awareness reacts, and the reaction is carried out to the organs of action by the psychic prana. So the psychic prana is the messenger or the carrier of impulses from outside to the inner awareness, and then it carries the reactions of the inner awareness to the organs of action, and we act upon our desires, upon that which has attracted us, that which we want to possess. Now, these nervous energies within us get excited or agitated. If you see something beautiful that you really desire, like the latest model of a car, for instance, you want to have it, you're certainly excited. There's an inner excitement. It is the psychic prana that is getting excited within us. And this habit of excitation becomes a habitual pattern. And it creates a particular individuality. It creates the personality. So this is how it functions. This psychic prana, therefore, has to be purified. It is the instrument of the vital and the mind. It completely takes over the sense mind. It invades it, pervades it. So we no longer think rationally or intelligently. We want something, we want it. No amount of reasoning will help. We forget whether we really need it. We confuse it with our need. The vital gives you enough reasons to convince that it is a need. You have to have it. Without this thing, you cannot do anymore. You cannot move on in life. It becomes a craving. So it is the psychic prana actually, which needs to be purified. I'd request everyone, we have a little exercise here that I thought we could just practice just to get a little feel of what we have been talking so far, as to how this desire happens in us, where we relate to it, how we relate to it, and then how we can transform it, purify it, as a small first step, as a beginner's exercise. So I will request you, wherever you are sitting, get comfortable, please. Sit still. You can bring your hands on your knees or lay them comfortably on your lap. Close your eyes. And gently observe the breath. Think of something that you desire. See the image of the object. In complete accuracy with full details. Bring the object to the front of the mind and see and observe it in detail. Notice if there is any change in your breathing. Go deeper and recall, if you can, your state of consciousness when you first encountered this object or this image. What was your state of consciousness? If you can, recall that first impression, feeling. What attracts you to the object? Pay attention to the impulses it sends out to you, to your mind, to your senses. Why do you want it? Does it have a utility? Does it answer a need? What will the possession of it bring to you? Identify with the object completely. You already possess it in your consciousness. Experience the joy of knowing it, possessing it. And now offer it to your higher self, to your higher ideal. Release it. Allow silence to penetrate your being. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Would anybody like to share? Yes, please. You have to unmute yourself.
The object that came to me was a German Shepherd dog that I've always had and wanted. And when I related to it, it was pure joy. It came from very deep joy and happiness. To possess it, when I looked from that angle, it was just a unity of oneness, of great joy. But the first impulse was excitement to see that face, the big brown eyes, the warmth, the comfort of a hug. The excitement was the first impulse, and then the joy. And then I released it to the mother. That was my experience. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Beautiful. Anyone else? So Sri Aurobindo says that purification happens as a psychological operation of analysis. This is exactly what we did. It was a psychological operation of analysis. You become aware of the mentality as a separate power. You used your mind and the capacity of visualization that the mind possesses, and you brought the image to the forefront of the mind. That is a mental capacity. You did it because you were observing the whole experience like a witness. You had the eyes of the Sakshi, the observer. You, for a short time, step away, step back from yourself, and you bring the image in front, like a separate part of yourself first. So you isolate it for free working. Then, Sri Aurobindo says, distinguish the psychical and physical prana. So your physical prana was you observed the breathing, and that's where Jayashree said she felt excited. The nervous energies were excited, stimulated. So the breathing becomes faster because you're excited at seeing the object you desire come in front of you. Suddenly it's available to you. You didn't have to go out to buy it, to acquire it, to fight for it, to struggle for it. You just brought it in the front of your mental awareness so easily. Look at the freedom. And then you experienced possession of it. Complete possession by identification. You possessed it in your mental capacity, in your vital feeling, in this body, here and now. There was no time, no space. It was a timeless, spaceless experience. You identified, you possessed it. You enjoyed it, experienced the ananda. And then you offered it, you released it and let it go out of your consciousness to a higher power. So you gave it back to source. The object was never ours to begin with. It belongs to the spirit, the soul. You offered it back to the source. And there was greater joy in that offering. Is the sacrifice. So what happened is that you rid the prana of the grasping, the craving, the wanting to possess, the desire. For a brief period, you cleansed the pranic force. You made the vital an obedient instrument of the mind. Unattached mind. It was an unattached mind. You observed the image with detachment, experienced the joy of the relationship with it, enjoyed it for a brief period, and moved it on. Isn't that what happens when we get the objects that we desire? We experience the happiness for a brief period and then it's gone. So through this little meditation, I tried to give you an experience of what we have been talking. Feel free to use this if you feel called to, or develop your own. Your soul, it is the soul that seeks purification and shows the methods that we need to use. But to be consciously conscious of this work, and if possible, to maintain a journal of growth. So purification happens through the power of the soul. In the beginning, one may have to do it again and again, a process. Sometimes just journaling it, what you're feeling. Later, we develop it like a muscle. You know, muscles atrophy if you don't use it. So this inner muscle, we have to strengthen the psychic prana and rid it of desire. Then you achieve the freedom from grasping. It's a great freedom that one experiences. You also acquire the habit of mental control over desires. That is one of the aspects of purification. It's a mental control. The higher power must be able to control the lower. And of course, in the process, you use stepping back, observation, identification. These were the steps we used. Any questions anyone may have?
My only question actually, Jayashree, is how we sustain that practice.
How we sustain the practice?
Sustain the practice, because basically how do we sustain the practice, Jayashree?
That's a very good question, James. Thanks for asking it. You know, when we talk of sustaining the practice, we are once again recalling, you know, the aspiration, rejection, surrender. The aspiration, I said right in the beginning, purification is a soul effort because it comes from the soul. So it is not an effort. It is a path. The path opens up in front of us and we only have to walk on it. So we only want to sustain something when we feel it as a necessity that needs to be done. So in the beginning, there is no hard and fast discipline or rule, but one can just weave it into the practice, start becoming more conscious of those things in our life which are constantly requiring our attention. Sometimes it may be a desire that is requiring attention. It may be something that is causing us anxiety or stress or fear. See, we are talking about the purification of sight. And therefore, when we see, I worked with the desire. I just took one aspect of it and worked with the desire. But it could be anything that we see that causes this excitation. It could be a dog barking at us, coming towards us, and it's fear. Fear becomes an excitement inside. The flee or fight. We are kicked into that mode. It's an exciting of the nervous energies. So anything that triggers you can be used, this practice can be used to experience that trigger internally, see the whole picture very clearly, and release it. So emotions, any kind of strong emotion, fear, anger, greed, lust, any kind of strong emotion can also be worked at when we see it as an object, when we see it as an object clearly outside of us in the mental screen. And we see all its possibilities. We turn it around, turn the object around and see it in all its different aspects. Then we know it. Knowledge will bring the freedom. So if we are convinced of this process, then there is no effort required. We will do it. And like I said, it's the soul's chosen path. When the soul chooses, it is time for purification, the soul will bring you to it, even without our mental thinking. I think there's a question here in the question box. I'm going to just look at it. Please tell us more about the journal of growth. This is a journal that you maintain every day or as regularly as you can. Let's begin with small steps. It may be difficult to maintain every day. And then on that journal, before you write that journal, actually you silence the mind by stepping back. You step back, become the witness, observe the breath. One way to silence the mind is to observe the breath. The mind stops running here and there. It just settles down with the breath. And then you move higher to the highest self, to your higher self above the head, and you experience the silence there. And then you pick up the journal and you write it as though you were writing it for a third person. This is what happened to this person today. And you don't have to write morning to night. You just write the salient features of the day, or salient thoughts, or a dream, whatever it is that strikes your consciousness. And how you felt about it. What was it? What was the shadow that came there? And then offer it to the light. If there was a shadow, if there was a disturbance, some behavior on your part that should not have happened, some words spoken, anything, an untoward or an anxiety, whatever is the shadow that was cast on the day, and offer it to the light. And as you maintain the journal, also see what is the effort you are making. Are you reading every day something? What are your prayers, meditating, inwardizing? Some practice of yoga. That's how the journal is maintained. And it'll come to you. The journal is actually maintained by the inner consciousness. We are just the instrument. There's another question. 3 types of impurities: ego, higher parts depend on the lower parts, and the third one is the influence of the gunas. The gunas influence what we see, how we see, They fashion our personality and cause impurities. And the last question was, what part does buddhi play in the purification of sight? That's a fantastic question. Buddhi is the higher intellect. And when we are talking of the purification of sight, we are talking in the lower nature. Desire, craving, all those things of the lower nature. Buddhi is the higher intellect, which somehow gets covered over due to desire, due to unpurified understanding. The understanding for us generally is not purified. It is covered. It is colored with the impurity of desire and ego. As we work towards cleansing this, more and more of the buddhi shines forth. So purification of the buddhi is the next step. Does that answer your question? I see somebody's hand raised. Abhirama Sundari, please feel free to.
Yes, ma'am. This is regarding the exercise that we did. And the moment you asked us to concentrate on our breathing, I did. It was slightly hard and very clear. And the moment I thought of the object of my desire, my breathing became very soft, and there was no sense of joy or excitement. There was complete peacefulness, complete peace, and some kind of silence. And after that, I couldn't come out of that sense of peacefulness, and I didn't know how to offer it to the Divine Mother or to the higher self. So there was a moment of mentalization, and I think it was stopped. I couldn't surrender it fully. Does it mean that the operation is not successful?
No,
Have I not surrendered my desire? Have I not got rid of it yet? Should I try more and more to get rid of this?
Abira, can I call you just Abira?
Abhi.
Abhi, all right.
Abhi,
First of all, Abhi,
yes.
Abhi, that was a beautiful experience you had. Thank you for sharing it. Actually, when you say that your breath became soft and still and peaceful, you had already offered it.
Oh,
see, there was no nervous excitement. There was no fast, quick breathing at the recall, the exciting of the object. The impulses sent by that object of desire had already been modified and smoothened out and purified in your being. So there was, you had, just by calming your breath and being in peace and soft, you had already achieved that purpose of offering it to the Divine Mother. How do we know? That's a very good, actually, it makes me think of how do we know that we have purified something in our being? What are the first signs? This is the first sign that Abhi just said. The breathing becomes very calm and soft. It means there is already an inner progression made. The mind has already started controlling the vital, exercising its higher influence on the vital. The vital is always jumping up and down. It's rajas. It's very dynamic. It's very active. So if that part is calm, that means there is already the mental control is being exercised. That's a great step. So please don't have doubts to answer your question. You did very well. You don't have to keep repeating it. But now you're from inside yourself, it'll tell you what is the next step. Nobody can tell you that. Your own inner self will tell you that. How to take it to the next level. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
There is somebody else who says to practice purification as an individual is a bit easy, but difficult to practice when we live collectively in a family or a society or a group. When you live or work in a group, how should we work towards that collective purification through purification of sight? That's a very good question, Sanjeev. Thank you for asking. It all begins with oneself first. First, we have to create that aspiration and that practice, and the first step towards opening towards that inner light first within us before we can take it to a group. It is very difficult when you live, to answer the first part of your question, when you live in a family or in a collective group, it is important to take out time for yourself. In the integral yoga, if you're serious about it, we have to take out time for ourselves and not allow the external world to rule every minute of our life. That is a must. You have to step away from that collective group somehow. Talk to them, talk to the people you're living with. Tell them you need half an hour of complete silence. Begin with a small little amount, but make that beginning. We don't have to all the time lay ourselves out for everyone. Our first duty is towards our soul, towards the divine, then everything else. So if your day starts at 4, I would wake up at 3:30. That half an hour in the morning would make the difference. Or if the day ends at 10, I would go to bed at 10:30, that half an hour. We can always find the time if we have the will. Secondly, as I said, it begins with the self first. As it begins with the self, as we begin to change, the collective will have an effect on it. I hope that. And the purification through sight is an inner process. It is an inner understanding and an inner process. So there you will have to make that little bit of effort, aspiration, rejection, surrender. You reject all that does not align with your soul, with your practice. Please put it out of your life if we are serious about the integral yoga. And then complete surrender to the mother. In my own life, I have found reading Savitri to be a great purification. It is a purification of all the parts of our being. And it's a complete sadhana. I don't have the words to explain what Savitri does to one in one's consciousness, in one's life, in one's growth in this path. I'm humbled. I cannot speak about the greatness of Savitri. I can only share with you some lines that have touched me. You know, Savitri is a very, very large body of work. Sri Aurobindo spent so many years of his life writing and rewriting it. He has left us the biggest tool of purification. Let us make an effort to pick it up and read a few pages or a few lines. Believe me, it is the tool for purification of consciousness. And sight is only an instrument of consciousness. So I'm going to read from page 484, the book of yoga. This is Savitri's yoga, also known as the Mother's Yoga. Book 7, Canto 2, is titled The Parable of the Search for the Soul. Aurobindo writes, page 484, a secret mass in dim inconscience gropes. Out of the inconscient and subliminal arisen, we live in mind's uncertain light. Arisen, we live in mind's uncertain light and strive to know and master a dubious world whose purpose and meaning are hidden from our sight. So whatever we see is a veil. The real purpose is hidden behind that veil. Then he goes further to say, below us sleeps the inconscient dark and mute, but this is only matter's first view, a scale and series in the ignorance. This is not all we are or all our world. Our greater self of knowledge waits for us, a supreme light in the truth-conscious vast. It sees from summits beyond thinking mind. It shall descend and make earth's life divine. Then the next page. Our larger being sits behind cryptic walls. There are greatnesses hidden in our unseen paths that wait their hour to step into life's front. We feel an aid from deep indwelling gods. It seeks for good and beauty and for God. And then the last part, 486. But for such vast spiritual change to be, out of the mystic cavern in man's heart, the heavenly psyche must put off her veil and step into common nature's crowded rooms and stand uncovered in that nature's front and rule its thoughts and fill the body and life. Let us all pray for the psychic light which will help us to truly see. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, James. Thank you, all of you.
That was beautiful, Jayashree. Very illuminating session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. We meet again tomorrow, 5:30. Yeah, thank you for participating and thank you, Jayashree. Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.